In the news right now is the allegations of sexual assault against Senator Al Franken. And pretty devastating stuff. If you've seen the photo of his groping the poor woman who accuses him of the assault, it's pretty hard to come up with any credible explanation that helps Senator Franken. Now the question is, what is to be done? He says he wants to go into the ethics process on the Senate side. In our view, the ethics process there and the Senate Ethics Committee is a black hole. We've had a lot of experience with that ethics committee. You give them complaints and they never act on them. Now I suspect they might act on the ethics complaint against Senator Franken, especially since he asked that the committee act against him. But let's be clear, you can't really trust that ethics process because in the end it's a political process. So that all being said, there's this other issue about accountability generally for Congress. Now there's been a lot of news this week about how it is that Congress funds settlements with people complaining about misconduct by members and staff in congressional offices. And the misconduct can range from sexual harassment and sort of unwanted touching and things like that, to discrimination and other allegations. Now you would think that would be public information. It isn't. It isn't. The only thing that is public is the amount of money that you as taxpayers have to pay out to settle these types of claims. Now the Congress has this Office of Compliance, which basically has a direct shot into the Treasury to take out any money it needs to settle harassment claims or anything else it needs to settle. And they put out numbers this week in light of the firestorm about this issue that show that there were 64 payouts since 1997, totaling $17 million. That's the only detail we have. They have it listed out, and I have the letter here. Maybe we can link to it. I have the letter here, and it just gives you the dates gives you by fiscal year the number of settlement awards and the total amount. So in 2017, thus far, there have been 8 payouts totaling $934,000 plus. In 2016, there were 15 payouts totaling only $588,000. Now, interestingly, in 2007, there were 25 payouts totaling $4 million. Why isn't any of that material available to the public? Because the Freedom of Information Act, the law that Judicial Watch uses to get the Clinton emails, to get travel records by President Obama and President Trump, all that information, that FOIA does not apply to Congress. So if you ask Congress for records, they don't have to give you anything. Now they can voluntarily disclose this information, which I suspect they're going to end up having to do, but there's no way to ascertain whether they're actually giving you all the information they have, because there is no legal process to get access to it. And this is why Judicial Watch has been pushing repeatedly in court to get access to this information. And to rely on the Ethics Committee to make sure that these payouts are appropriate and that there's been sufficient punishment for anyone involved, that's all a secretive process, it looks like. And we know these committees are politicized because the way they work is they get an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, so it's mutually assured destruction. And all you need is half of the committee to stop anything from happening, especially in the House of Representatives. For instance, we have an ethics complaint pending against Adam Schiff and Jackie Speier. And the Democrats on that committee have squelched it. And the ethics complaint concerns their mishandling or confirmation, inappropriate confirmation of classified information, which is not something they're supposed to do in the Intelligence Committee. It's a pretty clear-cut allegation, but they've been sitting on it because the Democrats are protecting their own. And look, it happens on the Republican side too, now and again. But I'm just pointing it out that there are currently members of the House, and I guarantee you members of the Senate, who are being protected by this ethics process that Senator Franken has invoked. Now, also in the news is Senator Senator Gillibrand, who is a senator from New York, said that Bill Clinton should have resigned, it turns out, after these allegations came out about Monica Lewinsky and other matters. Now, the Clinton gang is very upset because this senator happily took Clinton's support when she was running for office. So now that sexual harassment is a major issue, she's running away from the Clinton gang. But let's be clear. Sexual harassment was a major issue when Bill Clinton was president. Not just because of what he did, because everyone was aware of it as well. But the difference is the left protected Bill Clinton because he was one of them. And it was partisan and ideological, and he was credibly accused. Now, Judicial Watch represented Juanita Broaddrick, who was raped by Bill Clinton. Yes, raped. Kathleen Willey, who was sexually assaulted outside the Oval Office by Bill Clinton. Paula Jones, who was also assaulted by Bill Clinton when he was governor. We represented Dolly Kyle Browning, who was attacked and intimidated and threatened because of her relationship with Bill Clinton. We also, I don't want to forget anybody, Dolly Kyle Browning. Oh, and we represented Jennifer Flowers, who was in fear for her life after she talked about her relationship with Bill Clinton. So I don't want any lectures from any leftists about, oh, we have to be sensitive to the concerns of sexual harassment to the victims. Because we knew all those victims were being retaliated against by the Clinton gang, intimidated and victimized by his administration. The IRS went after them, for instance, many of them. And now we're being told that, oh yeah, maybe in retrospect that wasn't a good idea. Too late. Too late. So what is it we do? We make sure, and you call your members of Congress, and you call President Trump in the White House, and you say, why isn't there's no transparency law that applies to you? We want to know all this information out. We want to be able to ask you for information, and if you don't give it to us, we want to be able to go to court to make you give it to us. The FOIA law applies, there are FOIA laws that apply to state legislators, so it's not unusual. Now, it's not to say you're going to be able to get into every conversation every member of Congress has about an issue you care about, but there ought to be administrative aspects of Congress's operations, such as the payout of sexual harassment claims that are subject to public disclosure under law. It's pretty simple. I was testifying, we had the special hearing a few weeks ago, and if you haven't seen it, you should go back and look. At our special meeting that Louis Gohmert ran, the congressman from Texas, on the Hill about the Alwan brothers scandal. Remember, these are the Pakistani brothers who are now subject to criminal proceedings, who were running IT for Debbie Wasserman Schultz and being basically protected in their illegal activities and the consequences thereof by the Democrats they were providing IT services for, putting the security of all of Congress at risk and all of you who communicate with Congress at risk. And it's that sort of personnel practice and personnel issue which would also be subject to FOIA. So don't get distracted by everyone getting excited about Al Franken. The fact is, we don't know what goes on Capitol Hill because members of Congress want it that way. And the only way that's going to change is if the American people react. We can't sue Congress to force them to pass a law. Only you can pressure the Congress to pass a law. Obviously, now Judicial Watch, I've testified at least twice, no, actually 3 times to Congress, where I've encouraged Congress to pass a Freedom of Information Act law that applies to them. So it isn't like Judicial Watch has been silent on this, and we tell Congress every chance we get. You're complaining about transparency from the executive branch, but there's no transparency for you. And this is the result. You get Al Frankens, you get Alcee Hastings, who we sued in 2011 on behalf of Winsome Packer over sexual harassment allegations. We were vicious, our client was viciously attacked by lawyers paid for by the House, run by the Republicans at the time, on this sexual harassment claim. So there is a major scandal on the Hill, and of course, you know, you got these allegations against Judge Roy Moore, who's running for the Senate. I really don't know what to make of them at this point. Obviously, if they're true, they're terrible. I don't know if they can be adjudicated as true or not between now and the election, which is the conundrum that voters are going to have when they go to vote in a few weeks. But if you believe they're true, do you think the ethics process on the Hill is going to be fair? Or competent? The only way we get accountability is through independent oversight of Congress by the courts in an appropriate fashion. And it's not by the courts, it's by the people who go through the courts to exercise this oversight. So we're going to have Al Frankens forever if Congress is not subject to the basic transparency laws that the executive branch has to function under. Same thing goes to the federal judiciary. You know, the courts aren't subject to FOIA. That's right, they're not subject to FOIA. Now, it doesn't mean if there was a FOIA law applied to the courts, we'd be able to get into the internal deliberations of judicial decision making. But in the least, we can get into, we ought to be able to, because we're paying for it, how the courts are administering their funds, how they're conducting personnel, you know, the HR issues, things like that. So there's a lot to be done here. So forgive me for going off a little bit on it, but you know, we've been fighting this forever. Winston Packer and sexual harassment back in 2011. Alcee Hastings, by the way, is still in Congress. Ethics Committee has done nothing to hold him to account. We just had a story the other day. He's hired, not the other day, but earlier this year. I think his girlfriend is one of his highest paid employees. So don't accept any lectures from, you know, all these, oh, we have to let the process work and, you know, we don't tolerate this. They do tolerate it because they allow a system in place, they allow to remain in place a system that allows this behavior to go unchecked by the American people. I gave you the numbers, 200 plus claims, all settled with your money, and you don't know anything about those claims. What an outrage. And I admit that the FOIA law won't be changed tomorrow, but in the least, we should demand all that information, all the details.